Testing. 1, 2, 3. Hey, fish nerd. Hey, cichlid dude. How's it going, guys? What's going on with everybody today? Let's see, that's not scrolling very well. There we go. All right. Yeah, I'm kind of expecting for there to be a few people coming online today. The weather's starting to get nice and things are starting to pop outside, so I'm sure that we'll probably have less people today than we normally do. Hey Danny, hey Sharon, how's everybody's Saturday going? I've noticed that several people haven't been doing their regular streams, and I think that's probably to be expected this time of year. We're just in a time of year in the United States anyway, in the northern hemisphere, where the weather's starting to be nice, yard work has to be done, stuff has to be taken care of outside, so it's I hope Bob is very deep in the woods, fish nerd. I hope he's high on a mountaintop someplace enjoying himself. For those of you who don't know, that I've pretty much tried to step in and take over for Bob running his regular Saturday live stream, and I run earlier than he does so that he can run in his normal time if he wants to, or someone else can pop back in. Hey Jeremy, welcome to the stream, man. I was casting around for a topic, and one of the things, hey Juan, welcome to the stream, man. One of the things that my mind always goes back to when I start thinking about our hobby in a big picture sort of sense is where you believe our hobby comes down on, is what we are doing better for the fish in the wild, or is what we are doing worse for the fish in the wild? And this is an issue not a lot of people want to engage in. It's not an issue that's friendly for the industry that's selling tanks and fish food and transshipping fish and collecting fish. They all want to shy away from this question because in some senses what they are doing is bad for the hobby. It's bad, I say hobby, bad for the state of fishes in the wild. And that's kind of the topic that I'd like to broach a little bit today. It's really a mixed bag. There are some ways in which our hobby is extremely positive. You know, you can go down the list and tick off the positives of our hobby in the sense of the effect on fish in the wild. Here in the United States, one of the best examples is the case of the snail darter. And I don't know if many of you know this case, but in Tennessee, the Tennessee Valley Authority wanted to dam a river, and fish scientists and fish hobbyists and generally fish lovers banded together and did the research and stated very clearly in court that the snail darter only had one habitat that it lived in in the entire watershed of Tennessee, and that if this dam went through, that the result on the habitat that it lived in would remove it from being able to survive there. And that one fish, one little tiny fish, stood up against the power of the Tennessee Valley Authority, which is extremely powerful, and all their moneyed lawyers, and managed to stop the building of that dam. The Tennessee Valley Authority eventually backed down and did not build a dam, and the snail darter survives to this day because of it. And there are a lot of positives in our hobby like that. Positives, whereas there are fish scientists out scouring all the freshwater riverways, lakes, streams of our planet, looking for new and undescribed species. One, for ichthyology's sake itself, and two, for the potential of them being introduced into the hobby and being sold to hobbyists like us all over the world. So, on the one hand, you can say that we would not know about a lot of the fish that exist in the wild if it were not for the hobby pushing the boundaries of finding new species, of finding new variants of species in all kinds of different waterways on our planet. Cichlid Dude says, I don't want to buy wild caught. I feel we have enough in the hobby to support all of our needs. Jeremy, Sergeant Tanks, and if you don't know him, go check out his channel, says, my take, focus on endangered species, captive breeding, and reintroduction into the wild, natural environment. I would strongly echo that point. I recognize Cichlid Dude's point about not wanting to buy wild caught, because on the con side of this picture, what's up, Jim? Hey, Debbie. Okay, so we've got three good points here. Cichlid Dude talking about not buying wild caught, Jeremy talking about endangered species, and Debbie talking about whether individual fish are better off in aquariums or the wild. And I would have to say that on the con side of the ledger is buying wild caught, transshippers sending fish to the United States and Germany, and Jim's having a huge sale. What are you, moving to Washington, Jim? You can't carry all that stuff on your back? Individual fishermen in all these local areas that live below the poverty level can make a decent, awesome, Jim. I can't believe you finally decided to move, man. That's so cool. Congrats. And yeah, you're probably right. I do need to come grab that stuff. Don't let Jeremy have it all. I want some too. You sell to whoever comes first, Jim. I'll take your record albums, though. These local fishermen find the best way that they can collect their fish, and they keep them in bags of water and then transfer them to buckets. And the fish, hey Dion, welcome to the stream, man. They transfer the fish into little pans, and the fish are kept in a unhealthy environment for a long period of time until the transshippers can get a boat down there to wherever they are, load them up into bigger pans where they're overcrowded, and boat them back to the transshippers' facilities. And then in the transshippers' facilities, they're crowded together. Hey, Lumpy Dog. Hey, Phi. Welcome you guys to the stream. They're crowded together, fish from different locations with different pathogens in them. All of them are packed together in less than optimal water conditions. And there are millions of fish that die every year because of the methodology of the local fishermen, the transshippers, and the actual shipping, and then the places that they are shipped to on the end, not having the proper setup to receive the fish and take good care of them. So in that sense, buying wild-caught fish, having wild-caught fish shipped to us in the United States so that we can keep them, creates a lot of deaths because of how they're treated. It creates a lot of stripping the wild locations of their fish. It creates a lot of pathogens introduced to groups of fish that aren't really set up from their location to deal with pathogens from another location. So there's a lot of downsides to wild-caught fish. There's a lot of downsides to the whole packing, shipping, transshipping. The whole equation is fraught with problems that cause a lot of, you can say unnecessary deaths, but that's not necessarily true. I'm not sure that anybody could ever ship without a single loss. Hey Susan, welcome to the stream. Love, right back at you, Dion. I've yet to do my video for your contest, but I will. So we can say that there are a lot of negatives that have to do with the collection in the wild, and this is not disparaging the local fishermen that are trying to make a subsistence living out of fishing. Those guys are not really the problem. The problem is all the logistics and facilities in the process of getting them shipped to us. But on the other hand, on the other side of that same coin is the fact that we end up with fish in the United States, in Europe, specifically Germany, and all over the world that we can work with, try to breed, try to get tank-raised lineages going that are well adjusted to our local waters. And then we get to Jeremy's point, which was one of my big points. On the very plus side of another coin in this argument is that there are fish now that can no longer be counted on from the wild. There are places where they have been overfished, partly because of us. There are places where pollution has caused losses in local habitats to the point where they can no longer be fished for the hobby anymore. And there are places where greed, dams, factories, farms have created situations where these fish are no longer available in the wild in any sort of numbers that can be collected, and their habitat is gone. There is really no place left for certain species of fish. And one of the biggies here is zebra plecos. because the dams that have been put on that river have created a situation where they are just not finding them in the wild anymore. There are some Rift Lake cichlids that are highly endangered. Victorian Lake. I don't think there's too many in Tanganyika, but the population in those areas is rising. A lot of these fish are caught specifically for food or for sale, and there's a lot of cichlids and otherwise fish that will probably not survive unless people in the hobby keep them, breed them, improve the strains in the sense of cross bloodlines from other people's collections, and keep a captive population for such a time as when it is possible to repopulate them to the wild. There are a lot of zoos that are part of this project. There's several projects out there. I really don't think the zebra plecos are going to need a specific project for them, but there's a lot of fish besides zebra plecos that are in that same location that are no longer going to be able to have that habitat. So there are plus sides and there are downsides to this hobby, and there are a lot of things about our hobby that are very good. Yeah, there's a lot of people that are breeding. Zebra plecos are so expensive now, Kevin, that they're becoming almost common. Their price is still really high, but they're becoming almost commonplace in the sense that people are breeding them. But say 10 years from now, they fall out of favor and some new fish is taking favor. Hey, every Sunday is kind of happy. Welcome to the stream. But it's important that these types of fish are kept alive in the hobby so that at some point in the future, when the dam proves to not be so effective, when they finally recognize that by damming those rivers that they are creating, they're changing the microclimate, and there will be less rainfall in that area, which will deforest that area. And yeah, you guys are bringing up some great points. And Lon, you're right. It is getting better in some ways, and it's also important that we as hobbyists try to push as best as possible for better collection facilities being available to the local collectors so that the fish they collect. Yeah, Jim, I don't blame you. When are you going to move, Jim? Yeah, Lumpy Dog, you're right. It's the rate of pollution, the rate of greed using the planet as a ATM machine and thinking that you can just keep withdrawing and never expect there to be any damage is increasing so rapidly in our day and age that it is critical that we discover all the species there are out there and do our best to try to preserve them as much as possible, and that we push as hobbyists. The Amazon Research Center is a good example of science and hobby melding together to try to create a situation where everybody down the chain gets a better setup and a better facility possibilities, so that we lose less and less of the fish that are transshipped. Yeah, greed is the new orange, I'm afraid. It's really bad, and we have to push back as much as we can in areas that we can, in ways that we can. But you can't think that 5 minutes of effort is going to make a difference. You can't think that throwing a cowboy fit and laying on the ground kicking your legs. Jim, you're more than welcome to, man. I'm ranting by myself and just picking up bits and pieces as I go along. Welcome, Dead Boy. Welcome, Valley Fish. For the new people, we're trying to go over this topic of pro and con of our hobby in the real world and its effect on wild fishes. But every Sunday is kind of happy wants information about mystery snails. Every Sunday I'd say that you probably can find a great deal of information online that will give you temperature ranges, water parameter ranges, and I think it's incumbent on you to know that snail breeding is a product of how much food and space they have. So if you have them in a tiny tank and you don't feed them very often, they're not going to reproduce a lot. But if you have them in a large tank and there's plenty of food for them, and you create the moist, humid conditions and have a lowered water level in your tank, I think that you will find that they breed prolifically. That you're probably going to need some assassin snails to keep them in line, or they'll overrun your tank. Electric Water says, we are the alpha male of this world. If we were, we'd be kept out our comfort zone. Hey Rob, welcome to the stream, man. And Electric, if I didn't welcome you, welcome to the stream too. So I think that it is easy to make arguments on both sides of this equation. I'd say that it probably, all taken into consideration, it's about a wash. Now somebody added the point that to compare the average lifespan of a fish in the aquarium, the comfort of a fish in the aquarium, to the wild, and if you get a fish and keep it alive for 2 years where it's fairly healthy and thriving pretty well, and of course there's a lot of fish that don't live for 2 years, but if you can average 2 years lifespan on the fish that you are keeping, then I would say that you were probably doubling what the average lifespan of a fish in the wild is. Now, I don't have any figures to back that up. I don't have any studies to back that up. But I just understand how many fish are born in the wild and how many of those young fry are eaten and disposed of and never make it to adulthood. And if you add that into the equation, then yes, fish kept in tanks out-survive on average fish kept in the wild. And I think that even when you add hobbyists that are new to the hobby, that don't have a clue what they're doing, that are more destructive than good for their fish, I think even when you balance all those together, that you can still come down and say that on the whole, that fish kept in tanks have a longer lifespan than fish in the wild on average. Not that there aren't some fish in the wild that survive to grand old ages and huge sizes and produce female that produce spawn for 20 years. You know, we're not ever going to, in the hobby, we're not likely to ever reach the point of the potential of fish in the wild for lifespan and size and thrivability, because we can't compete with the amount of water that those fish in the wild have at their disposal. We just can't do it. Now, you can go look at Gopote Mel's channel, and you can see someone that believes in keeping one fish in a 500 or a 750 gallon tank because he understands the value of massive water changes, and he recognizes that in that situation that fish can come close to reaching its potential total size in the wild. So, you know, it's a mixed bag, but very few of us are in the position to give one fish in our care the most optimal possibilities. You know, we it's a balancing act for us, the balancing of how much money we can spend, the balancing of how much time we're willing to devote, the balance of how much knowledge we're willing to absorb. You know, on both sides of this equation, completely balanced out to both ends, I would have to come down, from my experience, on the side of total lifespan, average across all fishes, is better in a tank than it is in the wild. Mainly because of predation. Natural predation just wipes half or 2/3 of any population of fry out. No, Tankhead, I don't think that there's anything wrong with keeping fish. That's not what my main premise is here. But I think sometimes that we as hobbyists overlook what our hobby is causing in the wild. I think sometimes we are so separated from that dirt poor farmer that supplements his income by going 3 nights a week and diving on a rock edge and collecting plecos and keeping them and selling them to a transshipper. I think that we are so separated from that experience as people that live in a society that is well-to-do, that we never worry about where our next meal is coming from, or rarely worry about where our next meal is coming from. And yet we don't have the understanding that I think we should of what our hobby does to wild fish populations. We don't. All we see is a beautiful fish that we want in our tank, and all the rest of it doesn't matter to us at all. And I think that's a very powerful con of our hobby. I think that that is one of the reasons why our hobby is damaging to the wild. And I think it's incumbent on us eventually as hobbyists to draw back that veil so that we are in far more connected state with what we want does to fish in the wild. I think we need to find a happy medium where the people that are doing the collecting make as much money as the people that are doing the transshipping, that make as much money as the people that are selling to hobbyists, so that everybody is put in a position to not have to collect so many fish because so many of them are going to die, to take the pressure off wild populations, to enable local collectors to keep fish in a much more survivable situation until a transshipper with an even better survivable situation comes. Now, what does this mean to us as hobbyists? Well, it's probably going to increase the price of our fish. We're probably going to have to pay more for fish that come from the wild to facilitate all the logistics and to deal with all of the issues down the line. You know, there's graft, there's corruption, there's people paying off officials in certain states so that they can be the ones that get to ship. You know, there's a whole chain of situations right on down to that local collector. Hey King, welcome to the stream. Hey Vonks. Hey Dank. We're broaching a troublesome subject, and yet if you look on the other side of the coin, we're talking about a hopeful situation that we can, as hobbyists, believe me, there are a lot of scientists that understand which fish are endangered, which fish are important to keep because of their genetic makeup, because of their rarity, because of their unsurvivability in the current situation in their habitats. But there are not enough scientists with enough tanks or enough zoos dedicated to this issue to keep these strains alive. It is incumbent on hobbyists to be the vehicle that keeps these fish alive in tank-raised situations, because a scientist that recognizes that this specific fish is soon going to be extinct in the wild and collects 50 of them, and then recognizes that they can't get that fish to breed in an aquarium setting, is almost bound to turn to good hobbyists that they know and say, oh my God, these are the last 50 of these fish in existence as far as I know, and help me breed them and keep this species alive. And they need to be able to turn to us in the hobby who have way more tank space, way more potential for keeping fish alive, way more time to devote to all the tricks in the trade that we know that have helped us breed other hard to breed fish, and we can devote the time needed to get those fish to breed. And then it's a process of the rest of us in the hobby being willing to take these fish and keep them alive. Maybe not breed them, but keep a population of them alive so that it's possible for someone in the future to say, hey, I'm starting a breeding colony. I need some of your bloodline. Ship me 3 males, ship me 3 females. You know, there are certain parts of this hobby that we as hobbyists can do things that no science organization, that no zoo, that no nonprofit in the world can do, just because of the amount of tanks that we have available to us, the gallonage of water that we can use to devote by topic, by species, you know. And there are so many of us in the hobby that we all don't have to do all of them. That people that love apistos can do apisto-like species that are endangered in the wild, and Asian keepers that love Asian tanks can keep the fishes that are no, I mean, thanks for stopping by, man. Anybody that doesn't know him needs to go check out Tankhead's video. I hope that you guys that are here, that are regulars, will go and check out each other's channels and get to know our fish fam. Well, I've ranted on my subject for about 40 minutes now. I feel like I have at least broached parts of this topic, and I feel like this is a topic that we as hobbyists need to face. We need to be the ones that take the lead on this issue. We need to be the ones that step up and say, Rob, your point is well taken, that there are probably only 300 or 400 people across the world that are truly skilled enough to take that. But if you multiply 300 times 100 gallons, which is 10 10-gallon tanks, you get an awful lot of water that's available for deeply effective attempts at keeping fish that are endangered in the wild alive, and learning how to breed them and transferring that knowledge both to the science side of things and to the hobby side of things. But there's probably only 300 people that are real experts in any of these areas. But there are probably 30,000 people that are skilled enough to keep a population alive in the hobby across the planet. And when you multiply 30,000 times 100 gallons, suddenly we're talking about enough water acreage to really do the job. And that can't happen in a zoo setting or a science setting. Even one warehouse can't compete with that, you know. Yeah, I think it's incumbent on us as hobbyists to understand both sides of this equation and to recognize both sides of this equation realistically. Let's face it head on that we cause almost as much damage in the wild as we do good in the wild, so that we can start pushing the center point more into the do good in the wild part. And it's not going to take that much effort on our parts, a little bit of research to recognize who is doing a bad job of transshipping, who is not paying their locals well enough so that the locals have the wherewithal to keep their fish that they collect in a better situation, who is not seeing to it that that the logistics people between the collector and the transshipper are doing a better job so that they're not killing so many fish. There's a lot of little improvements that can make a huge difference in the whole hobby when taken as a global situation. And it's actually going to take very little effort on our parts in total. It's going to take some effort. It's not going to be something you're going to be able to spend 5 minutes surfing Google one day and make a huge difference. But at least doing that occasionally will give you the knowledge to kind of start looking at the whole picture realistically and saying, you know what, I believe in supporting things like the Amazon Research Center. I believe in supporting shippers who are trying to buy straight from the collectors so that they knock out the logistical middleman that is killing so many fish. And yeah, Lumpy Dog, you're right. Support local and national breeders when possible to reduce the impact on wild populations. That's exactly what I'm hoping that these kinds of discussions can bring up to hobbyists in general that basically only see this as a mural, a living mural in their living room, and they just go and buy stuff and they don't think anything about anything else that has to do with the hobby. I think it's incumbent on us to not beat people to death with it, but to offer them enough information so one, we plant the seed in their mind so that they might think about it, and two, we arm them with information that is realistic, that doesn't have an axe to grind, that can give them food for thought, for them to open their eyes a little more and begin to search for themselves on this issue. This is an issue that most people in the hobby want to sweep under the rug because for the past 30 or 40 years, you can probably say that the damage done by us as hobbyists to fish in the wild was more damage than good. Right now, because of the fact of fishes going extinct in the wild faster than we can collect and identify them, I'm saying that right now in the hobby that we are probably at a point where the balance is really close. That the amount of good that our hobby does for fish in the wild and the amount of harm that our hobby does to fish in the wild is probably, very close to even. Maybe still a little bit more damage than good, but because of the situation that's developing in the world, I think that it's probably pretty even now. It would be really great if in 10 years we could say that it is much more on the good side, than the bad side, and that it's changing, that it's continuing to get better for wild populations. Excuse me. All right. I've probably ranted long enough for this. If you guys want to offer general questions, Jim, if you're still with us, you could give us a list of what you've got up for sale so that those of us that are close enough might suddenly decide to jump in the car and drive up there and buy it from you before you can sell it to somebody else. Vonks, that's a good question. And Vonks is asking, how many fish do you need to keep up one species to be healthy and strong? And yes, Susan, that's a great thing to bring up. He's going to Corey, Danks. Corey must have finally convinced the man that he would be better off being there. You know, the old saw in the hobby is 6 to 7 fish will give you a population that for schooling fish will make them comfortable, and for breeding purposes will probably give you 1 or 2 pairs. So that would be the minimum, is 6 or 7 fish. But my experience is that if you want to keep the bloodline strong, and if you want to keep the variability in your population strong, you need to have about 20 to 25 fish. Rob Hicks brings up the point, Dwayne, you know, like me, this hobby is so different than it was 25 years ago. Yes, it is so different. There's more people that are connected in the sense of, you know, Facebook, YouTube, email, vlogs, sites. There's more information out there, and I think it's no, I didn't see him, Danks. I think that while for the most part the regular species that you go to your local fish store and see, that we probably had some species then that are not in vogue so much now. I know that 25 years ago I could get a whole lot more Central American cichlids, a whole lot more different types, a whole lot more different variants than I can find usually at a, you know, brick and mortar store. But when you add online to it, there's probably a lot more that are available online. So yeah. Yeah. But I will tell you one thing, Rob, that I have noticed in the past 10 or 15 years, that pet stores are no longer being staffed by people who eat, sleep, and drink the fish hobby as a life. You know, people like Eric Bodrock, those kind of people seem to be less and less and less in the live fish store business, and it seems to be more of people that are bean counters, people that will recite to you what they've read in a book, people that will give you erroneous information because they really don't know. Enjoy your dinner, Lumpy Dog, and thanks for stopping by, man. It really helps. I don't feel like that the quality of the people that are behind the counter these days, and of course this is always a generalization. There are going to be tons of people out there that love the hobby just as much as we do or more, and are as knowledgeable or more knowledgeable than we are. that are still out there in the business doing this stuff. But I think it may be an age thing, that the people that are our age to remember the hobby 30 and 40 years ago or 20 years ago are starting to retire and get out of it, and the new people that are taking their place are perhaps more business oriented than they are hobby oriented. And for that reason, I think that there's been a lot of change in pet stores lately. I just don't feel like I'm talking to someone. I mean, go to PetSmart. Good luck talking to anybody, much less talking to someone that knows what's going on. There's just, to me, unless you find a old mom and pop fish store run by people that have been there and done that and have kept all these fish, you just don't get quite the same service, in my opinion. Now, if I was lucky enough to live where Corey's store is, I would feel like that was a situation where I was getting someone that actually knew and cared as much as I do about the hobby. So there's always going to be exceptions to my generalization here, but just on a general feeling thing, I just don't feel like the people are quite as connected in fish stores now. You used to be able to go to a fish store and spend hours talking to somebody behind the counter about fish. They would talk your ear off if you gave them a chance to do it. You'd be saying things like looking at your watch and saying, "Oh, I gotta go now," that kind of stuff. You don't run into that anymore. It's pretty much wham bam, thank you, ma'am. Let me get your money and we're out of here. So there's a lot of this that I haven't covered deeply, as deeply as I was thinking about covering it, but I think I've probably beaten this dead horse enough. I just feel like this is a subject that we as hobbyists need to broach more often with each other, that we need to be more aware of it, that we need to spend more time talking about it in general than we normally do. Yep, exactly, the fish nerd. And that's not to say that there aren't great PetSmarts out there with people that are doing the best they can in the situation. So, don't take my ranting to decry everyone in the hobby. And I am the first person in this hobby to tell you, as badly as you might think about your local PetSmart or whatever big box chain you have, you need to support that place, because there's going to come a time when you are hit with a disease and you desperately need to go get medicine right then, and your local fish store has been closed for hours, but that PetSmart may be open and have what you need right then. And just that alone is worth a lot. It's worth you supporting them just so that you can access what you need from them when you need it. Yeah, fish nerd. Your local fish stores are where the people that are really into the hobby are probably going to be. But that doesn't discount the need to have big box stores that offer a selection of items that you could need in a critical situation. If your fish suddenly develop a disease and you need Furon right now and you don't have it and you can't wait to order it, you don't have the time to order it online, then you're going to be mighty happy when you go down to your local big box chain and figure out that they do have what you need. Of course, you may go in there and they may not have it either, but Yeah, Jim, I'm echoing the congratulations about moving, and it'll be a lot easier for you to do what you do there than do it where you are now. I'm sorry that you're moving from my localized area, but I'm happy for you that you're getting a chance to do this. I've got a feeling that it's going to work out well for you. Hey, Josh. Yeah, that's true, Rob. That big box stores are the ones that keep big breeder farms going. And you're right about that. So I'm about done with the rant. Give me a second here. I've got to make a pit stop, and I'll be right back. Wow, still 18 people in here? I'm surprised. 35 hours to Washington, huh? That's a long drive. Can you get all your stuff into your car? Can you travel that light? At least you'll be close to your Lakers. You'll be able to see Paul George more, Jim. Well, Jim, I want some of your tanks. Um, I don't know how many fish I'm going to be able to afford to buy. I just pretty much shot my wad on this camera. Uh, that's going to suck up all the expendable income my wife and I have for probably till Chicago rolls around, you know. But I would be remiss to tell you that I didn't want your albums and that I don't want some of your tanks. Maybe what I need to do is just have you wait until you sell off as much as you can easily, and then wife and I will drive up with the van and try to carry off what's left, and I will come pick them up, Jim. Of the fish that you have, I'm not sure what I could conceivably put in tanks. And if I came too soon, you'd need the tanks to keep the fish alive in. So I'm probably going to have to wait until later. But you've got my email. Email me and give me a running commentary on what. I think Dayton is about 5 or 6 hours for me. Hey, Gnome Aquatics, you're getting in kind of late on this, but I've pretty much done with my pro and con rant, unless other people have other issues. Jim, just stay in touch with me. I will take tanks and take them off your hands, all that we can stuff in the van, but I'm not sure how many fish I can really take. I just don't have the places for them, to set up. Maybe if I get this 55 set up and running before you leave and get it matured, I might be able to take some fish off your hands. Well, yes and no, Fish Nerd, because he's going to have a lot more fish available to him when he gets where he's going than he has now. Has anybody spoken to Lucas lately? Jim, have you talked to Lucas lately? I really missed his live stream last night, and I hope everything's okay. Yeah, Jim, you're gonna be swimming in fish when you get there. What about respect for all kinds of life, Debbie says. And Debbie, are you saying that in relationship to my rant and my topic, or are you saying that in some other sense? Because I think it's, that as tropical fish keeping hobbyists, we're more dedicated to that direction. But I think that us showing respect to the wild, to living populations in the wild, is in a sense all life too. I think that if we dedicate ourselves in some small way to tipping the balance more towards the good than the bad, then I think that we tip the balance towards the good for all living things in the wild that are being dealt with. Because by their nature, arguments for the wild encompass everything. And I think that's an important, I don't think that as fish hobbyists it's as incumbent on us to deal with other areas, but I think that it's incumbent on us to connect with other people. Rob says we are keepers of souls, but not all know how. I'm going to say that that's above my pay grade, Rob. That's a topic that I'm not able to get into without delving into religion and politics and a lot of things that probably don't need to be gone into here. I've been very happy with the way we as YouTube fish family have tried to steer clear of the shoals of politics and religion and hatred and all these icebergs that are floating out there. We've done a good job of trying to steer past all these, because there's probably not a lot of good that's going to come out of it. I do my best to curb my desire to get in everyone's face and scream about politics. You know, by nature, that's what I want to do, is convince you that my side's right and that your side's wrong. But I understand that my rights end where another's begin. So I've done my best. I mean, it gets out. Okay. Debbie says that she was commenting on how so many newbies do not research prior to purchasing fish. Yeah, well, that's incumbent on us, Debbie. That's incumbent on us as fish family to reach out to and to try our best to get it through new fish keepers' heads that the desire to buy a fish should be preceded with the research needed to understand what the fish requires and what the fish will require before purchasing. But all of us are guilty of that. There is not a single hobbyist in this hobby that hasn't gone out and bought a fish on the spot without knowing what that fish was or any of its requirements, and just marched home with a big smile on their face, carrying that bag saying, "Look what I got," and then see you later, fish nerd. And then, you know, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. And that's part of this hobby. That's part of the way we learn in this hobby, is through trial and error. And yes, that costs a lot of fish their lives. But as an experienced hobbyist, I'm going to tell you with no quibbles that you're going to kill a lot of fish before you get to a point where you can keep them. Yeah, research is much easier to do today. But of course, on the other hand, there is a lot of bad information out there that's easy to access now too, you know. So it's important that each person express to new people that while there is a wealth of information on the web, that there is no governing body on that information on the web, and so it's possible that you might get bad information if you just go to one place and search one time and take that as the gospel truth. It may not work out the best for you, because although that person that is giving that information may be well-meaning and may have, because of their skill level, the advice that they are giving someone may not fully explain to someone with a lesser skill level what they need to do to make that advice work the way it did for the person that was giving that advice. Well, Debbie, you're one among millions then, I can tell you. That if you are one that has never bought a fish without doing the research first, you are a very rare breed, and I applaud you, but I'm telling you that you are not the rule. You are the exception to the rule. Yeah, Vonks. There's definitely more information out there now than there was then. That back then what we got was from magazines and books, and it didn't always fit perfectly with what we were trying to accomplish ourselves. But if you are someone, even back then, that dedicated himself to a certain type of fish, generally, if you search through the hobby, if you search through magazines, if you search through books, if you search through clubs, you could gather enough information on one specific species or one type of fish to get enough information to learn how to keep them, or to learn how people around you were keeping them the best they could, because they're, this hobby is always evolving. We're always getting better. We're always learning new things. Someone is thinking outside the box and figures out a way to do something that no one had done before, and get a fish to breed that no one could get to breed before. There's so many of us out there with so much information and so much skill and so much access to people with that much more skill, that we can collate enough information now and think outside the box a little bit from that information and say, well, what if I added salt to the water right when they were in breeding condition? Maybe that would cause them to breed, And I'm just using that as an example. But that's basically how all these species get bred. Well, that's true, Debbie. If you're a teacher, if you're someone who's already used to research and deep reading and deep retention on subjects that are wide and varied, and this is a subject that you have a great deal of passion for, and so you invest that much more of that energy into it, then yes, I can see why you might be someone who is always doing the research before the purchase. And that's a great thing. That's a great thing to pass on to others. That's a great thing for us. That's a great ideal for us all to strive towards. But I'm telling you from personal experience, sooner or later, you're going to see a fish in a store and think, oh my God, I want that fish. And if I don't, there's only one. If I don't buy it right now, somebody else is going to get it and I'm never going to see it again. And you buy it. That happens to most, if not all of us. Yeah, Rob, that's a problem. That people, this day and age that we are living in, people's attention spans and their will. Oh, I wanted those leopard frogs, Jim. How could you sell them out from underneath me? Not to mention the rainbow fish. Grats, Jim. Thanks for stopping by, Jim. And believe me, I'm so happy for you that this is working out with Corey. I think this is going to be a new age in Corey's situation and yours too. People in this day and age have short attention spans and want instant gratification. So it's really easy for people to take one look at one page on one internet and think that they are completely armed with knowledge and go out and do it. And if you search out a good site, if you go to Catfish Planet and use that as one site to look up stuff about one specific catfish, you're going to get some pretty good information. You're going to get the collation of a lot of good information from a lot of good hobbyists that will probably give you a pretty strong basis to operate on. But if you go to Joe Blow's fish site that nobody but him knows, and that he's telling you he's the be all to end all and nobody else knows anything, and you follow his instructions to the letter and things work out really badly, well, then you've learned a lesson, and you've probably gotten off cheaply. Yeah, Debbie, I've done that many times. Purchased the fish on the impulse and then gone home and dug through all my books and locations where I could find stuff on the fish. Yes. Yeah, Vonks. Plus, Vonks, you're living in an area where there is a multitude of excellent hobbyists. Probably within 300 square miles of where you live, 60% of the excellence in the hobby exists. So, man, you need to get out there and access that. Jim is finally breaking down and moving from Ohio out to where Corey lives to work for Corey. Thanks for stopping by, Susan. And Susan, I really appreciate that you guys are doing the all-girls stream. I support you completely. I try to do my best to help and to stay out of your way. So, Fish Fam love to the all-girls stream, Susan, and thanks for stopping by. I'm probably going to shut this down in a little while anyway. I've been running about an hour and 20 minutes, and that seems to be a pretty good time for me. I feel like it gives us a chance to talk about a topic or to get through a lot of questions and answers. As most of you know that follow my channel, I did purchase a camera and 2 lenses. And as you've seen in my Bokeh Bounce video, if you've watched it, but it's going to be a steep learning curve for me to get myself to be able to function with this camera and these lenses that I purchased to produce quality video. So you're probably going to have to bear with me for a while as I learn my camera. On the downside on the home front here, some of you know that I have been searching high and low to figure out what's going on with my wife's Pseudomagil gertrudiae, and I'm probably butchering that name. She bought 8 of them. They seem to be doing fine. They seem to acclimate fine to the tank, but we are down to 3 now out of 8. So we've lost 5 fish, and that is it's abhorrent to me to lose that many fish. And what's more abhorrent to me is to not be able to recognize what's killing my fish. Or my wife's fish in this case. Yeah, Jeremy says, my words of wisdom for what it's worth. Never take anything you hear as fact. Ensure you've analyzed it and are aware of what you are actually getting into. And I would have to agree with you wholeheartedly, Jeremy. I think most of us try to preface anything that we say with the fact that, as IFG eloquently states, this is just something you're hearing from a stranger on the internet, it's incumbent on you to do the research to tell if my anecdotal evidence that I am giving you, this worked for me, is applicable in your condition, in your state, in the issues that you're having, the problems that you're trying to solve. It is always important for you to take what someone tells you and check it out yourself. You know, when you buy that bleach product, it says test this on an invisible area of the piece of clothing in case it is going to destroy it or stain it or something. Yeah, I take very personally the loss of fish. That's not to say that I don't recognize that I'm going to lose fish. I'm not unrealistic about it, but I feel like those fish are in my care and that it's my responsibility to do everything that I can to keep them alive. And so it hits me pretty hard to lose fish like that. I do not like it. I do not like it, Sam. I am. There are always times when we are faced with issues that we are either incapable of recognizing for what they are, or we do not have the knowledge base that supports us being able to diagnose a situation correctly, or we do not have the testing equipment that allows us to get to the bottom of a situation. So we're always going to run into shortfalls as hobbyists. We are always going to have to be open to learning, to trying our best not to repeat a situation again, that if we get fish and we lose them, that we try to learn everything we can about why we lost them and how to prevent that loss in the future. It's possible that what's going on with these fish is that our tap water might have some heavy metal in it that is not really affecting our other fish and shrimp, but is affecting these pseudomogills in a detrimental way. I'm also a firm believer in not using a shotgun approach to the fish hobby. When I have an issue with my car, I don't drive it to the car parts place and go inside and start buying parts and taking them out and putting them on my car to see if that fixes the issue. And when it doesn't, I go back in and buy another part and bring it out and put it on my car to see if that fixes the issue. That's not my way. I'm not one of these people that use a prophylactic approach to medications. I've always been, it comes from me starting out in the hobby when medications were almost as deadly to our fish as they were to the pathogen or the disease. I don't want to put anything in my tanks that I don't absolutely have to put in or that I don't recognize that I have to put in. If I can diagnose a disease and I know that this will cure it, then I'm more than happy to use it. But if I cannot diagnose a disease, if I cannot recognize, say that what's really going on in my wife's aquarium is that it's a water quality issue in the sense of heavy metals that are in the water that are affecting one type of fish that's very sensitive or more sensitive than the others are, and I start blasting the tank with medications, I'm going to do more damage to my fish than I will be just losing the fish that are being affected by the water conditions. Bees Aquatics wants to know, what do you guys recommend to raise the pH? Like in a 5-gallon fish tank that has no real plants except for a moss ball? Bee in a 5-gallon tank You're going to have to be very careful with how you raise the pH, because you'll shock your fish if you raise it too quickly. And with only 5 gallons of water buffer, you've got a really good shot at raising it too quickly. I would suggest either one of the powder forms or the liquid forms. Hey, Nisi. I'm probably not going to be running too much longer, Nisi, but welcome to the stream nevertheless. Okay, you're doing it before you add fish. That's great, B. I'm glad to hear you say that. In that case, I'd say go get a bag of crushed clamshells or crushed coral, put it in a little filter bag, stick it in your hang-on back filter, hang it in your tank somewhere, and that will probably raise pH enough in a 5-gallon tank. Hey Charles, welcome to the stream, man. You're getting in right at the tail end, my buddy. You've missed my rant about pro and con in the hobby, whether the hobby is pro and con for fish in the wild. And I guess to cut to the chase, my decision on that, while still out somewhat, is that right now, with the state of our world and the state of our hobby, I think we are very slightly better for fish in the wild for a number of reasons, but that I think we need to change that. I think we need to step on that good side of the balance and push it way more into the good than it is in the bad. All right, guys. I know a lot of you have just gotten on, and for you, I'm sorry, but I guess I'm going to have you watch this in the replay. Good luck. Have a good Saturday or Sunday, as the case may be for some of you. Good luck with your fish. Good luck with your tanks. And good luck with your summers or winters, as the case may be. And I'm out.